schools.
We're live? Okay.
We're live, so can we have
Excellent.
roll call for the Joint Conference Committee on Senate File 118? We don't need a roll call.
All right.
All members present. So members of the Joint Conference Committee, this is the original Senate File 118, Bighorn and Domestic Sheep Relocation Federal Action. First thing I want to do is compliment the House and the members of the House. Much of what you guys added really strengthened this bill. I think it's a much better bill today than when it left the Senate. So kudos to our colleagues in the House who are really taking a hard work at this thing and making something that came over the Senate into a much better piece of legislation. There's only one provision in here that gives the Senate a little bit of concerns. And I'm glad to see my friend Representative Conrad here. But there was a third reading amendment that helped clarify it, and I really appreciate the clarification because it was very confusing on the Conrad second reading amendment to the bill. And the amendment certainly provided additional clarification that I think met the intent of what Representative Conrad wanted to do, was basically set a kind of a sunset date on any potential federal changes to rules that would comply with the Wyoming statutes that we're creating with the bill. Our only concern is the date, and it puts it out several years out into the future. Certainly that's something that could be done, but it would potentially slow down a lot of discussions, I think, as far as even working with those potential affected interests. Sometimes if you put things off a long time, they tend to fall off the scale. Sure. And I think it's important to keep this front and center and keep attention that we do have an issue out there. And so my preference would be if we could come to a reasonable compromise. I think the amendment's fine. I think it's just putting this out to 2 years and then starting the process kind of may actually result in some negative consequences, because I fully anticipate, based on the nature of the bill and the directives to the Department of Agriculture to work on our RHAP program and the Game and Fish to start developing a disease surveillance program, I'm afraid that we would potentially lose that inertia. So my recommendation is if we went into that third reading amendment would be to move that effective, and this deals specific with the federal law. So I'm gonna read that. Well, let me see if I'll paraphrase. Or maybe Representative Conrad, would you like to explain, what that is, seeing as how it was your amendment?
Representative Conrad?
Thank you, Representative Wester and Senate, and more importantly, some members of the Senate for the compliments with regards to getting over the goal line. I think part of the reason that we got it over the goal line seriously was to avail some concerns, many concerns with members of the House. They were definitively not in favor of immediate, or as it was intended in July 1st of 24. So we came up with that July 1st of 2026, and I believe it gained votes, and I don't mean that to disrupt the overall goodness of the bill, but it gained votes. Additionally, it gave us, I think, or at least more importantly, members of the House, some relief to understand that they could put systems in place and as we talked about, due diligence or checks and balances, et cetera, through that 2 years to ensure that everything was in order, specifically with the ranch owners, et cetera, so forth. So that was really the primary concern with my first amendment. And obviously, as you pointed out, that second amendment really clarified, because in the event was really confusing depending on what lawyer you asked. But that was not my language, that was theirs. So that's where we clarified the bottom part of that. But as you know, that or more importantly, the House representative in that area was still against that measurement, but she did thank me for the 2 years to allow her to get with her constituents and convince or convey or address their concerns specifically. So that's really where the 2 years came up. They didn't think they'd have enough time to do so. Additionally, in speaking with Wyoming Game and Fish, Miss Bruce, and is it Mr. Eisbach? I can't remember his name, but she was in the office. We had a conference call, I think it was yesterday, and they were very comfortable as well and appreciated the work to clarify not only in any event, but also the 2 years to allow them to continue to work on that. So I viewed it, Senator Hicks, as a positive. So that's really the basis of my amendment.
Well, and I appreciate that discussion because we don't need to sit through those discussions, so that helps clarify that. And I do think that provided some reassurances. It's a discussion that we had, many discussions I participated with those permittees and then some of the advocates for wild sheep and then also the Game and Fish Department. I think it would be still reasonable on our part to support that, but I would like to move that date back to July 1st of 2025. And again, I worry about putting things off for 2 years and losing the inertia. And I think we have an obligation to work with those livestock permittees out there through the appropriation, through the Department of Agriculture. I know the department has made some significant commitments to starting to reduce that size because it was a cooperative review area in our current plan and bring that back. My concern is if we wait 2 years, we lose that inertia of all these things that could happen, and we'll put them off, and then pretty soon we'll be up against a situation where we haven't done our due diligence because we've got, what I will say, we just didn't feel compelled that this was a high priority to get all these other items done. And so my recommendation would be to the committee is to find that compromise, and move that, one thing is just move that from 2026 to 2025. So.
Mr. Chairman and Senator, I guess the question would be, could you lay out a potential, like a scope and sequence, a timeline of maybe, because obviously they said 2 years to talk with landowners and have that conversation, and kind of explain what that timeline would look like, maybe both of you guys, if they feel, because, and maybe I'm wrong, but deadlines a lot of times in my world and in the world that I've been in is we need this much time and then we'll wait or waste until we use that time. So maybe it's a situation where we have a year worth of work here. Maybe we have 2 years worth of work here. Maybe we have 6 months. But we need to, can we have that conversation about, from both you guys, and maybe what that's looking like? And obviously, maybe we don't know that. Maybe that's outside of our purview, but I just was wondering if we had an idea of what you're saying. I think a year would be good. Do we have an idea of what needs to be accomplished in that year? And we had 2 years, what maybe needs to be accomplished that would take 2 years?
You want to take a shot at that? Or, so there's a number of, there's a whole list of actions that have to happen. And under the department's protocols, normally they start initial disease surveillance and testing for any potential sheep population that they would use for reintroduction. And history has taught that there's only certain periods of the year that you can actually move sheep. You don't do it in the summertime when it's hot because they get stressed and they die. So that eliminates any of those warmer months during the year. The other thing is you obviously don't move them in the spring, even though it's still cool when you've got young lambs and all that stuff. So it's kind of a narrow window to do that. And so you're typically looking at sometime in late or early winter to late winter. So could be December, January, February, March is kind of that window. So you have that 4-month window. Even before they start the capture and movement, they still need to go on there. A lot of times they will test those sheep, mark them, re-release them after, because it takes sometimes a number of months to get all the results back on the pathogens. They're testing for pneumonia, the very thing that is a concern, another range of disease. And so often they'll test those, mark them, come back, recapture, but at least do the disease. Maybe sometimes it's just a surveillance of that population. If we delay that process and say, because here, and I think we all understand, we could come back next year and repeal this whole bill. And that's a concern about moving the can down the road and provide it. And I appreciate the date certain with this, but it really slows that down to the point where it could be 2 years before we even start doing the due diligence. On the livestock permittee side, to do the range condition assessments and all those things to address standards and conditions and planning, so if there was any range improvements that needed to be needed by those permittees, those still have to go through archaeological clearances sometime. So let's assume that we were going to go drill a well and put in 10 miles of stockwater pipeline. That normally takes the Bureau of Land Management a year to get all of their clearances done. This This could something that if we said, okay, if we keep this up in inertia moving forward, instead of waiting until 2026 and start the disease testing, the range monitoring and all that stuff. Not that it couldn't, even with the way the amendment is currently crafted. My concern is we'll put it off for a year and then we'll forget about it. And then we're back in 2026 and we haven't done our due diligence to keep that inertia moving for all the parties involved. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Representative Harrelson, but that's the scenario. And I think by moving that date back, it puts a little bit of impetus to keep this discussion going. One of the commitments that has been made is, again, back to shrinking that size of that impact to that from the cooperative U area down. That would take a recommendation from the interaction working group and commission action. If we delay that out too, because doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency, we lose momentum in trying to provide those reassurances for both parties. So again, I'm not opposed to the amendment. It's just the date I'm worried about. That 2 years from now, we'll have lost the momentum and the inertia to keep all the groups involved, engaged, working on this issue, addressing those issues, concerns of those permittees, and allowing the opportunity for the department to have some certainty that we are moving in a direction. And even then, it does not necessarily guarantee that there would be sheep moved in 2026. But it keeps the process moving. And that's my concern with the date of just waiting 2 years for the federal government to do anything. Anyway.
Say, Representative Conrad, I mean, do you want to chime in, or what's your
Yeah,
reaction?
yes, Chairman, Western, thanks. And Senator Hicks, my goal is not to delay any progress or momentum. My amendment was to avail, and more importantly, to hear those constituents and those owners, ranchers, et cetera, cattlemen, whatever we refer to them as, to allow them the necessary time to ensure that everything is good, everything's well. And that was the value. In fact, speaking from Representative Allman, he said the sheep growers were extremely happy with that amendment, the 2 years, as well as, like I said, Ms. Bruce and the other gentleman. So am I fixed on 2 years? I feel strongly about it, but I want to negotiate, obviously. But I felt that would alleviate the many, many concerns that were approached by me and many others, that the 2 years would allow them. And one thing I need a clarification on, Senator Hicks, is why if that's the 26, we're putting pressure on the federal government, obviously, but what prevents us from doing anything until 26? Can we continue the momentum we have and continue working towards that path with the introduction in 26? I just don't see where my amendment prohibits or diminishes the momentum or the movement that we have now, or the initiative.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it prevents any of that. I just think it takes, we've got time, and so we don't need to act today, and we don't need to do the things. And so, and I really do appreciate trying to address those concerns and alleviate some of those by that date and that language. Again, the language is fine. So, even if we move that back to a point, so July, let's say December 30th, 2025, or January 1st, 2026. Keep in mind, it's that window of opportunity to do some of the, even to do the disease testing and those type of things. They are not going to go out there and capture sheep during the hot period of time. That would still hopefully alleviate. We're only going to move that back 6 months, but it gets to that issue of being able to actually handle and manage those sheep.
Chairman Western, and to Senator Hicks, is your point, I am comfortable to go in July 1st, or rather January 1st of 26.
What's that?
January 1st of 26, would that meet us halfway?
I think that would help just the mechanics of.
Okay. I'm in agreement.
So,
It's about 18. Yes, it's about, give or take, 18 months.
yeah, and I think that's a very reasonable time frame. So if we
So
could,
let's,
we could agree on January
just
1st.
for staff, let's make sure that would be, what page is that?
So that was, that is on page,
Yeah. I was gonna just reinforce that argument.
so it's page 9, line 9, in the Conrad Committee of the Whole Amendment. No, that's not it. Oh, yeah, that's the delete, and so it's the effective on the Conrad third reading amendment. And would just go to the very end of the line where it has the effective date of July 1st, 2026,
To January 1.
so January 1 of 2026. Are we tracking, staff?
We got that?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion's passed. What we'll do is, this is a Senate file, so I'll get the conference committee drawn up and
The report.
get the report,
Okay.
and we can get that down to you guys, and we'll see if we can't convince all of our colleagues of the wisdom of the action that this committee took.
We can be a little cantankerous, but hopefully there's a little wisdom left, right, Senator Hicks?
Well, who are you referring to?
Say something?
In very broad
While
terms.
we're done, just so it looks like I contributed to this conversation. I just want to reinforce deadlines create activity, for sure. And my background is oil and gas lease in early career, 10-year leases, nothing ever happened until the last year when it was expiring. So I think you guys made a good compromise here. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. This is the Joint Conference Committee on House Bill 45, the first Joint Conference Committee, and hopefully the only one. I think just to recap for the members and for the audience, thank you for being here. House Bill 45 engrossed left the House with a 5% as the number we're talking about as far as the exemption level. The Senate moved it to 3 in a standing committee amendment. That was, anyway, and so the House did not concur. So our difference is 5% on a House position, 3% on a Senate position. So with that brief explanation, Chairman Crago, any thoughts from your end? And then we'll go to our chairman of our Revenue Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just in discussing the difference between 3 and 5 with members on our end of the chamber, and then or our end of the hall and your end of the hall, it seems like I think we could come to an agreement, split the difference. We just go to 4%. I think that's something everybody can live with, and it seems straightforward and sensible. And so that's what we would propose.
Thank you. Chairman Beitman. Chairman Beitman is, of course, the Revenue Committee chairman. It went through his committee on the Senate side. He has members, some of his members, his committee are in the audience here. So Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the discussion on the Senate side was the use of 3%, which closely more mirrors the inflation numbers, broadly speaking. In talking to Chairman Crago on his inflation numbers on the specific assessed valuations is closer to 4%. So really what we're looking at is a 1% difference in where we land, and I think 4% is a good compromise position. This is a great bill, a good tax policy for our taxpayers, and I think it's time to put a bow on this one and be done with it.
Anything from Representative Northrup, Chairman Northrup, Representative Northrup, and then we'll go to our colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have to agree that the compromise, of course, most logical is 4%. So let's make it so and move on.
Thank you. Senator Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I've been through the numbers on a 10-year average. The net difference is very minimal, and I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you. So I think, go ahead, Senator, or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just to clarify, just so we're completely clear, the standing committee, Senate Revenue had a couple clarifications within the bill, and so whatever compromise we come up with has to include that. And then the good chairman of Judiciary also had a technical correction on the floor, and so that would be included in any solution we come up, just to make sure that we all understand that.
So thank you. So this is a delete and a further amend, and the only amendment is going from 3 to 4. Is that accurate for the body?
That is accurate, Mr. Chairman. So the technical corrections were mostly commas, but they were expensive commas. We fixed those. But the only substantial amendment here, the delete and further amend, would be moving from 3% to 4%.
Thank you. Because we do have a lot of interested members in these tax policy issues, is there anybody from the public that would like to testify to this bill or to this conference committee? Is there anybody online? Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Please, anybody wants to testify, please come forward, occupy the seats. Anybody online for our staff? No. Mr. Winnie, please.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. You all have heard me testify in committee before. I support the bill. I think it is vastly important. You have people on fixed incomes. I've used the example of my own Navy retirement that has doubled in 20 years, and fixed income people haven't. This is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right, seeing none. I think we do. Okay. So members, what we'll do is we'll have a report prepared with 4%. We have a report prepared with 4% on it. So we will sign that and turn it in. There will be a message coming from to each of the bodies, obviously starting in the House and then come to the Senate. And we will finish up this bill. Thank you very much. One thing important I think to recognize is just for the members of we're going to take up 2 more bills. Other chairmen are on those bills. I think it's the preference of the chairman of Revenue, who's on one of those chairmen. They're going to take up 54 first, I think. It might take a little more time, or then maybe they'll both take time. So 54 will be up next, and we'll shuffle the chairs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Appreciate you. Thank you, members of the audience.
I missed my
Good afternoon, everybody. We are here on Joint Conference Committee number 1 for Senate File 54. I'm here with my co-chairman, Senator Beitman.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And as you all know, as the bill came across from the Senate, it had a dollar threshold exemption for primary residences. Over on the House side, the formula was changed. Same idea is to give a substantial homeowner's tax exemption, but it was changed to a percentage. So 25% is the homeowner's exemption on the House side. So it does give us some flexibility because on the House side, our dollar exemption, we can go anywhere from 0 to 200. And on the Senate side, you can go, if you want to do a percentage formula, you can go anywhere from 0 to 25. So with that, I'll turn it over to my co-chairman.
Yes, and also I think the other major change was we had a 2-year sunset, and I believe the House moved it to 1. So we're also can negotiate between those two positions. That basically sums it up. Do we want to turn it over to discussion or any suggestions?
Mr. Chairman, I think we open it up for discussion. And as a conceptual framework, I think maybe one fair compromise would be to, say, adopt the Senate formula type of a dollar amount of exemption for 1 year and then go to a percentage for a second year.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I would support that 100%.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with that concept, then we're also then taking the Senate position of 2 years on the timeline. That would necessitate keeping that language, deleting the House amendment. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct. And partly because I think that if we're going to provide effective tax relief for people, that doing it for just 1 year, although it seems a bit unusual, right? I think homeowners want to have some certainty that at least that their taxes won't go down substantially in 2024 and then suddenly hike back up in 2025. I think that would be a kind of roller coaster for the taxpayer that I think the taxpayers would not necessarily appreciate. Now, it's true that if the constitutional amendment passes in November, then the next legislature may have more flexibility with what it can do if we have a separate asset category of residential property. But yes, it's a long-winded way of saying yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's worth just thinking through what this looks like if we go down this route. The reason to go to a percentage is to actually create something that's more equitable, that allows everyone to have the same amount of tax that as a percentage of what they paid in, given back to them as a reduction in the assessment. If you do a straight dollar figure, that dollar figure will benefit people on the lower end as a percentage of their property tax, much more so. If you bring in these two different ideas, one year and one the next, you're going to see an absolute change in what your assessed value is as a result. Because you will, and I'll just give you an example. And I don't know what number we were talking about. We had at one point, we were trying to max a fiscal note. So I'm just going to give you a couple figures that I believe were the same fiscal note, treating it the two different ways. So if you have a property, for example, if it's a $350,000 house, which is kind of typical, you would get if you did the percentage first, you would get $1,100. Wait, hold on. You would get hold on, sorry, reading the wrong column. There's a lot of columns here. Let's say a $400,000 house probably is a better example. You would save $650 one year, but then you would only save $450 the next year. So assuming your tax doesn't change at all, your assessed value doesn't change. So you're going to be, people on the lower end will get a better benefit because their houses are less. But people on the higher end will see a much different. So it's very inconsistent. And the reason we looked at, and the whole committee voted to go to a percentage, as did the House, is to recognize that in the northwest part of the state, we have been the ones that have been impacted the most by the property tax increases, not only in terms of the dollar value, but the percentage increase. And so if we're going to give an exemption, we should at least be equitable in how we apply it. So Lincoln County, Teton County have seen their property taxes double in 3 years. If we go to a straight dollar figure, someone who has, and as I talked about on the House floor, you have what is a very modest home that's now priced at $1.5 million. So you take a $1.5 million house, they're paying over $10,000 in property tax. And you want to either just give them $450 off that, it's not very meaningful. At least by going to a percentage, if it's like 25%, then they're going to get $2,500 off their $10,000. And that seems fair to me. Now, it does mean that on the lower end, folks won't get as much, but they also didn't pay in as much. And even, I think even if we did this in 1 year at the 25%, that folks are going to get, when you look at how much their property tax, the average for the state, that was 57% increase. So we would be giving folks back half of that, essentially, if we did it in 1 year at 25%. And then we can talk about the limit. But I just think, I know it sounds like a compromise, but it is poor policy.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the good representative. Just some good remarks. It makes me wonder if we don't front-end load this with the House side to follow with the Senate side, but that gives us this year to take a good, hard look, see what the reaction is, learn from our assessors, revenue, and then this next session, we'll have an opportunity to modify or tweak it. So maybe we do this, Mr. Chairman, from what we just suggested a few minutes ago, based on Representative Story's good comments.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and I do appreciate the use of numbers. Actually, what are the consequences of this? We're talking about policy, but what does it mean when you actually apply the formula? And I appreciate that. So if I could, I'll ask the chairman of the Revenue Committee, the bill that came to the Senate as a committee bill had both. It had a starting point, and then it had a percentage above that starting, or no, it had a percentage, and then it had a maximum up to 200 or 300, I don't remember, we had several versions. So I guess my inquiry is maybe we actually put both in the formula. Maybe we have a base of, let's say, 100,000, and that's a homestead type, everybody gets that, and then a percentage above that. I don't know what the numbers do for that, but is that something that folks should be, and that is then it's uniform. We're not flopping the system in the middle, or potentially. Who knows what the next legislature would want or not want to do. So I'm a little uncomfortable with saying we're going to do it this way, and then we're going to switch it next year, because that's another legislative session, and they come in and change everything. So I just throw it out there that if I could be reminded what was the interim bill that came forward, just to be reminded. And then if there's a discussion we could have about, and we don't have to complete this right now, we can think about it, come back later. We're going in at 2 o'clock, so if we need to, we can go to 54 and we can revisit this, if there's another way to think about this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the Joint Revenue Committee bill that we sponsored was 27, I think, 0.7% roughly. 25.6. With a maximum benefit up to 200,000?
May I?
Yes.
Interrupt?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Just to clarify the difference. So yes, up to $200,000. So the limit was on the exemption. What the House passed is actually a limit on the fair market value that the exemption applies to. And it actually makes a big difference. And it allows these middle-class homeowners who do have more valuable properties to at least get a reasonable exemption versus otherwise, you're limited to 200,000, which if your house is that much more.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to address one of the things Senator Barlow talked about, which was having a flat exemption with a percentage above that. We actually explored that idea on our end because we thought that'd be a great solution. The problem with that is our department cannot do that. The computer system does not allow for that. There's only so many code availabilities left within the system when we're using several of them up on bills we've already passed. And so we're out of fields essentially for that to happen. Otherwise we could, we could have done that, but we can't as of now. We will be able to in 2026, apparently, when the new system comes in, but right now we can't.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, so I think as a background to this, if we're going to go from 1 year to 2 years, we also need to talk about the fiscal profile and what the total cost of it is. And to me, it seems like as part of our discussions, we need to have a sort of a target of how much money we're willing to spend on property tax relief over the biennium. And as a suggestion, because the 1 year was over 100 million, and my recommendation would be that we say whatever the dollar value exemption or the percentage is, that we have a target of about $200 million for the biennium to spend, right? So you could do, if, for example, it's my understanding that if you had a 25% only formula, and if you exempted up to the first $1 million of home value, that costs $102 million a year. And so if you did that for 2 years, if you had 25% at $1 million maximum, for 2 years, you'd be spending $204 million. And to me, that's in the range of what the fiscal profile can bear without us having to come back and talk about an income tax or raising sales tax to compensate for it. Mr. Chairman.
I see what you're saying there. When I looked at the total increase of property taxes paid from 2019 to 23, I got a spreadsheet from LSO, and that number was roughly $250 $56 million. If, assuming, that's 2019 levels and the huge increase up to 2023. So our constituents are looking for about a $250 million tax cut, basically. What you're suggesting is 102 over a biennium. I think the Senate position, as it left our body, was closer to 150 for 1 year, if I'm correct. And that's certainly what our position was. So I think 200 flat cap is low. I think if correct me if I'm wrong, you're on appropriations, I'm not, but I'm thinking we're putting in a 300 million in the savings in this current iteration of the budget. So we have the money. So I don't think we need to limit ourselves to a specific appropriation. I think we settle on what that percent is that's fair and equitable, and we can pass. We're at the 11th hour, we're on the goal line here, and I don't want to fumble the ball and lose this whole bill. So we're getting a little too cute and I think we need to back it out and look at it broadly.
And Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I don't want to fumble the ball either. I think we can reach a solution here. So on the fiscal profile that came out, the white rod that we have has 125 million baked into it for this bill already. So if you, and maybe Representative Craig or someone else here would know, if you had a 25% exemption and you raise it up to $2 million, I think that gets you to about 114 million, then you double, it's 230 or so. I kind of like frankly, my policy preference, although it was not the House position, my policy preference is to give a dollar value exemption for at least one of these years. I like that because frankly, to be honest, it just helps people who are my constituents. I don't have very many constituents who have homes worth $1 million. Most of my constituents are median income or below. And for them, a $100,000 homestead exemption, that's $690 off their tax bill. And so if the average tax bill for them is $1,800, $2,000, that's a 35% reduction for them. So every 100,000 is $690. So as awkward as it might be to switch formulas, and I agree with Senator Barlow that it's awkward to do that, but apparently given the constraints of our IT system at our department that handles revenue, we have to pick one or the other for a given year, apparently. So I would be amenable to something, if we hit from my point of view, if the price tag for 2 years ends up being $250 million, I think we can handle that. So I don't want, to stick on 200.
Thank you, Chairman Byman. So just a question for you, actually, is if we get to the right dollar amount of, relief for the folks back home, are you amenable to looking at the percentage as it came out of your committee to begin with? Is that something, because we may not have the math in front of us right now to do that. And I'm just thinking ahead, like, we have time to go work the numbers. You guys are going back in. We have to go back in for a little bit, but we could do our homework and come back and say, okay, here's some options. If we do the percentage route, is that something worth pursuing over the next hour or two?
Well, to answer you that quick, I think the Senate, the big hangup in the Senate's the going to 1 year and offering 1 year of tax relief is we feel quite frankly is a slap in the face to the taxpayers. And we feel that we need to at least do 2 years. Now, whether that's a percentage or the dollar amount, again, you're either benefiting more, it's either tilting more towards the Teton counties of the world, or it's going to be more benefiting towards the rest of the middle class and the rest of our constituents. We will get pushback in the Senate on the percentage because it does skew it towards the higher end homes, but it's equitable. We'll give you that. There's also that argument. And there's people in my body that believe in the good tax policy is based on the percentage because it's equitable. It's going to be tough, but I don't think that either way, whichever one we pick, whether it's a dollar amount or the percentage, will pass if it's within reason, if we don't get crazy with these numbers. I think we'll have a deal. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you, and you stated about where I was going. The target number that Chairman Stitt threw out a few minutes ago, I think the Senate is amenable to that. We had, Senator Beitman and I worked quite a while on this, and we actually had that in the back of our minds as a target that we thought over a biennium, looking at 200 plus was realistic. So I think that piece is good. I think if the House can go to the 2 years, that's going to be a big thing to the Senate. The piece that, and I think we can talk about a percentage, Mr. Chairman, because you get up in your part of the world, those homes have exploded up there too. Anything with a mountain in the background, which is all over the state of Wyoming, has had just a remarkable rise in assessed valuation. So in my neck of the woods, I've got a lot of middle class homes. So I think it's sellable. I think we'd have a shot.
That's all right. Thank you, Senator Beitman. I just want to explain the concept behind the fair market value limit and push back a little bit that I'm not trying to help middle-class people in Teton County. You just have to recognize that their home values have gone up. And, it's not a bad thing, generally speaking, when your home value goes up, at least, a certain amount, right? That's kind of how the US has worked quite well, and we subsidize that in a lot of different ways. The issue was thinking about where that limit comes in, and the idea of that is, and I picked 3 million on purpose originally because that's where you kind of see the break between what is a kind of a middle-class home, believe it or not, in Teton County, and when we're helping, $400,000, $500,000 homes in the rest of the state. And what the limit does is it says whatever number we pick, that translates, if it's $1 million at 25%, that translates to a $1,600 exemption for anything above that, for that and above. If we pick 2 million, it's a double that, it's $3,200. So again, that $2 million house is paying $14,000 in property tax. So the idea was we actually, even because this is broad and we are giving it to everyone, the thinking was we didn't have to, our second homeowners and very wealthy people who do have $5 million homes, $6 million homes, they will only get what a $3 million homeowner gets. So that's the concept behind it. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Mr. Chairman, I think we might be able to get things done pretty quickly here right now, because what if we say for 2 years, we have the 25% reduction, goes for 2 years, and we put a $2 million cap on that. That the price tag on that appears to be about $108 million per year. That's $216 for the biennium. The fiscal profile has 125 in it right now, which means we'll be spending $91 million more than what's in the fiscal profile, which has the effect of the LSRA, instead of being 1.57 projected on June 30th, 2026, will be $91 million less than that. So that's, I guess I can make that a motion if we're not ready to do that.
Question on the motion real quick. What would be the difference between the 3 million and the 2 million fiscally? Yes, Representative.
According to Department of Revenue from yesterday, 3 million is 114 million and 2 million is 108 million. And it's only a small difference because we've already essentially reduced those upper end to getting quite a small percentage of their property tax. Does that make sense?
Yes, to me it does. Senator Barlow, you look confused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate all of this,
Yeah.
and I know there's a motion on the floor, but I want to clarify, does this, and I don't remember, and I apologize, does this bill have a primary, all residences first year and primary the second year? Because that's also a discussion we've had with other bills, and I just want to clarify where we are on this bill, and I apologize, I don't know the House position well enough to know where we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And yes, so to clarify, what we're discussing has been single-family residence. And it takes out the application process and everything, so it's doable today. And so, anything else? Yes, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The thinking was going to not primary, because we don't know who primary owner occupieds are at this point in time. Certainly something for the Revenue Committee to take up in the interim and thinking about how we want to figure that out, because I think at one point we'll want to figure that out. But the idea was to move it into 2024 and do it on residential structures only and do it for everyone, and then we could do it. But we do need to decide today.
Okay. So the motion is at 2 million, not 3 million? Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, I prefer it at 2 million. I think that helps a lot of people, and it doesn't hit the fiscal profile quite as hard.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
So just to clarify, we're at 25%, 2 million, up to 2 million, and 2 years. We've covered all the issues that we have between our positions. The flat rate, the 200,000 is still deleted. Thank you.
Correct, and I do need to point out, there was a difference in backfill, where both the Senate position was backfilled through the LSRA backstop. The House position was to pay for it out of the general fund. So we would need to decide whether to adopt the House position on the backfill or the Senate position. I completely am indifferent. I don't care, because everybody's going to get paid regardless. It doesn't matter which pocket we pull it out of. But that's something we need to discuss.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't think the bulk of our Senate colleagues will get hung up on that either. And I feel very comfortable with the $2 million level. If we go higher than that, I think there might be some push a little bit. So I'm comfortable with the motion. Is that a friendly amendment that you're suggesting, Mr. Chairman, on the motion on the table right now, to take care of which fund it comes out of?
Well, we can dispose of this one first, and then
Yeah.
maybe talk about the backfill and take care of that last, because I think those were the only two outlying issues at this point, so. I guess we'll call the question?
Question on the motion?
Yeah.
All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand, since we have to have on both sides. Okay, that passes 6-0. Okay, done. Further business, I guess we need to talk about the funding source.
If I I'm sorry, I got distracted. My colleague came in, I got another conference committee. What was the two sources of funds, or what was the difference in the backfill source? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. To my recollection, it was, the House was backfilled directly out of the general fund with a specific appropriation. And it was, 125 million. The Senate took more of we'll just backstop from whatever they need, whatever they're short, the LSRA will backfill automatically. So that was the two differences.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to that, I'm actually a proponent of using the LSRA because that is cash on hand. That is not projected revenue. General fund, as a rule, is based on income flow. That's just me personally, and certainly we have an appropriator here who may disagree with that, but I'm more comfortable with an LSRA, back it up with a cap or whatever we need to on the top end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, and since our fiscal profile for the budget that we're voting on today has 125 million of general fund allocated in it on page 2 of our fiscal profile, maybe we could do something a bit unusual and say the first 125 million will be out of general fund and the balance out of the LSRA, because the effect ends up being the same, that your LSRA balance at the end of 2 years is just going to be that much lower.
Let's make that motion.
Aye.
So I'd make that motion?
Make that
Aye.
motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
And subject to, and if I may as to that motion, subject to if our fiscal staff says that there's something administratively that doesn't work about that we need a technical correction, that we would authorize the fiscal staff to make whatever technical corrections might be necessary to make it work. Is that fair enough? Okay.
All right.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we did good work. I think we're.
Thank you all.
Representative Storr.
I'm going to put a memo together, I think, on the bill to just share with all the, so you can understand it. What everyone's actual exemption will be dependent on how much of their property is the residential structure. So just something important to know. I've been working with Department of Revenue and the assessors to kind of try to figure out what my best guess right now is it represents, 19, 20% decrease across the board until you get to the higher numbers, obviously. So until 2 million.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a housekeeping matter, this is a Senate file, so then as it, Co-Chairman, do you contemplate that Senate staff would then prepare up the joint conference committee, proposed conference committee report for our signature?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, I'll
Thank you very
have them
much.
do that. Thank you.
And we'll try to get our signatures on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Members of
Thank
the
you,
House,
everybody.
appreciate it.
All right,
We are adjourned.
we're adjourned. We got one. Who else is here for House Bill 4?
This is pretty easy.
This is easy. So let's just,
Byron went to.
yeah, 4? How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. All right.
Good afternoon. I will call this joint conference committee to order. We are here on, we don't do any sort of roll call, do we? No. We're here on House Bill 4, the property tax refund program, to discuss the differences of the bills that came out of our respective houses. So in looking at this, I'd say that there were two significant changes or differences for discussion. First of all, the House had added an audit provision for an oversight function to ensure compliance with the program and to discourage fraud and to have an opportunity or a way for us to learn about that should it be happening. So we thought that was important, so I'd like to discuss that. And then the second change is the Senate added, and I think I'm being corrected that maybe at some point that we actually took it out. But anyway, there's a small appropriation to defray administrative costs in two different places to the Department of Revenue. So those are the differences between the bills. And so I'll open it for discussion. Senator Pappas?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, just on that second one, I wanted to explain it a little further. It actually wasn't in there like I had mentioned earlier. It actually was an amendment that Representative Storer brought, a second reading amendment that failed in the House. And I brought it back in our committee and it passed. So it's something that the House considered, but the House considered, but didn't go with it. We considered it and thought it would be appropriate to make the Revenue Department whole, both in programming and in personnel.
Yeah, and we're tight on time. I'll just say I don't have any problem with that. So, okay, we're good there. So let's discuss the audit provision. I think it is something that we're definitely interested in. So I can discuss that. I think, possibly a little cleanup language, but I know that both of my representatives here on the panel are interested in this. So do you either of you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. To our colleagues in the Senate, this was brought to us by our treasurers and speaking to my treasurers in the many counties actually out west, that there was just some suspicion of misrepresentation. So to keep it vague enough and not point any fingers, I think it is a concept that's important to us in at least Lincoln, Teton, and Sublette counties, and I'd like the ability to keep it broad, to not put too much burden on any specific department, but worth consideration.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did visit with the Department of Audit yesterday because they didn't come and testify to us, but I think they testified to your committee. So we did learn, their concern about, if we're asking them to do 10% or something like that, that's 900, and that's to ask a lot. So we've adjusted this a little bit. We want people to understand that they're signing an affidavit, that it is a legal document, that they are saying this is the truth, and just being able to say, we're going to check on you now and then if we think that this doesn't work, and at the behest of county treasurers, we thought that was maybe a good way to go without putting into asking the Department of Audit to do anything, any specific number or anything.
Right, so then I guess we've got a couple different, like she said, 10% is 900 some, so then we talked about 1%, then we thought maybe, and I think that's the flexibility that Representative Byron was talking about, is to stay away from that. Well, so we're still authorizing it, but we're not. And so our two discussions there, we had the word random would be to remove that. And then also, so that's a possibility. The other thing for consideration that would put the onus back on the counties would be the wording, the Department of Audit, upon the request of a county treasurer, shall conduct a review of the program for compliance. So we're kind of fine with however, we go, but we really are interested. There are some actual, there's a belief that there is some misuse of this program. So it's just something we would like to figure out. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that language is pretty good. I think I would not use shall. I think we ought to use the word may. So it still gives teeth into the statute that these audits can happen. But, you know, if you say that the counties, upon the request of the counties, the audit department shall, I mean, who knows? That's wide and open. I mean, there may be a rogue county out there that just asks for everyone. So I think it should be up to the audit department to determine how many numbers. So I think there should be a may.
Madam Chairman, if I may, I think I agree with my colleague. I see where this language is going, and our concern was based on the fact that from the Department of Revenue, first of all, this was a third reading amendment on your side. It came in late and wasn't probably vetted very well, so I'm always leery of third reading amendments. And then when it came to our committee, we heard concerns from the Department of Audit that this could really burden them down for such a small program. I mean, dollars and cents wise, are we getting the bang for the buck and putting them through all this work? And what are they going to be doing and what are they going to find for not much money? It just seemed like a waste. So we took that out. I see where you're going here, but I do agree it should be a may. And I don't think we should, does it say for the whole program or is it on a case-by-case basis? Because if the treasurer thought that somebody was engaging in fraud and they wanted to refer them to the Department of Audit, then I think on a case-by-case basis, that's prudent and it's a wise use of our resources. But to have a whole county trigger a whole countywide audit of the program would not be good. So we gotta make sure we thread that needle.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Brightman. I completely agree, and we're just trying to find the language for that reason, to leave the flexibility. That's completely what we want. I agree with you. You start somehow doing something that has the effect of triggering a wholesale review, and like you say, it's not that big of a program. So we're trying to find the flexibility. So I think we would go with may. I mean, our good departments, no matter what they are, want to do the right thing. So if they believe that there's something going on, I think they would do that. I mean, it is just a review too broad, or does that leave them the discretion? You know,
I think with the may, it leaves them discretion.
and so that they can do this in a limited manner if that's what they so choose, which is really what we're trying to offer them. So I think we're all in agreement here.
I think the case by case, we can put that in.
Well, that's the discussion about the flexibility. If we just have may conduct a review, then we leave that for their discretion.
Of the distributed property tax refund, it's not the whole program, it's under this program, so I think the may takes care of it.
Takes care of it. I think I would agree. Okay, so I will make that motion. I will read what we have here. To keep the Department of Audit, upon the request of a county treasurer, A or any, may conduct a review of the distributed property tax refund under this program for compliance with the requirements therein. Pardon me?
Do we need public comment on this? I guess we didn't take it last time.
I haven't, you guys haven't taken any.
The first committee did. Yeah.
Do you, we're gonna open it for public comment before we vote. Mr. Reaman, go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Jeremiah Reaman here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Perhaps you've already talked to the treasurers here, but I want to be very clear that there are only 5 counties that currently offer the county program. And that's where I have heard from county treasurers and from county commissioners that they are concerned about a few people that have applied. My just note of caution, and I think perhaps we should talk to the treasurers. I don't know if there's communication with the department and the treasurers in those other 17 counties relative, or 18 counties relative to to these people that are applying. So we may be putting a thumb on 5 counties simply because there's a sharing of data because they're both offering the program and the others aren't going to perhaps have that same sort of, notification and outreach to the department. I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, but I do think maybe we should just check that quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Reaman. Representative Storr, go ahead. These guys are back on the floor in 3 minutes, so.
Never mind.
No, we need to go ahead. Ask, we need to see if we think there's an issue here. I guess I don't understand. Truly, I'm not understanding how this would negatively affect those 17 counties.
Madam Chairwoman, what I'm trying to suggest is that in those 18 counties, the county treasurer may not have the information for who applied, so they may not be able to raise the red flag relative to the state program. The reason that those other 5 have the information is that they have set up a county program that mirrors the state program, and so they know who applied for the state program. They can offer that to those individuals relative to their county program, so they can raise the red flag, if that makes sense.
It does, Mr. Reaman, but I still, so what you're saying though is that the information is probably better in 5 counties due to the county program so that they could see this. The other 17 might not as effectively be able to, but we wouldn't not want to have this in there because the 17.
Yeah, and please don't construe my testimony to be to don't do this. I'm just suggesting your flags might only come up in 5 counties. If your intent is to be more broader than that, we're gonna have to make sure that there is that sharing of information.
Okay. Anything further? Are we good with this witness, gentlemen?
No, I was asking my colleague but I'll ask Mr. Reaman while we have him. So I'm sorry, my brain is in a fog. We've got a million bills going and a budget going. Refresh my memory on the application process. So do the county treasurers process these applications, or does the Department of Revenue process these applications? Because I know we're asking for proof of your tax, your W-2s, your tax returns, all this information, and a sworn affidavit saying you're not lying. Who looks at those? Is it the county first or the Department of Revenue? Because that makes a difference, because we can also add Department of Revenue to that sentence and add both to that sentence if that's the case, but how does it work?
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, Senator Beitman, the state operates their program.
Okay.
The county has the ability to operate its program independently or work collaboratively with the department.
Thank you.
Thanks, so we can just add Department of Revenue to that sentence.
So an or an and?
Or on request of county treasurer or Department of Revenue.
Okay,
If they suspect it, they can report it. If the department suspects it, they can.
perfect.
Yep,
Perfect.
that worked.
We'll add that. So I'll make that, I'll amend my motion, that's included. Hopefully, I don't know if I think we're good, and I think these guys need to get going. So, I mean, is everybody clear?
Aye.
Good? Raise your hand if you're an aye. Perfect.
Thank you, Madam
5-0,
Chairman.
thank you.
All right.
Get back to the floor, get to work.
And since it's a House
Thank you.
bill, can you have your House staff draft it, draw all this up, and we'll come sign it? Or
Yep.
bring it down and have us sign it?
Will do, thank you. Adjourned.